The rain had just begun to fall, soft at first, then harder, turning the city sidewalks into mirrors that reflected passing headlights. It was one of those evenings when people hurried under umbrellas, heads down, avoiding eye contact, chasing warmth and comfort. But for Ethan Blake, there was no rushing home to comfort. Home was a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city, small but clean, shared with his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. He was a single father, and every dollar mattered. Tonight, though, something more important than money was about to test him, a moment that would change his and someone else's life forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of standing up for what's right, please take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps stories like this reach more hearts that need a reminder that goodness still exists. Ethan had promised Lily a special dinner that night. After months of overtime at his janitorial job, he finally had enough to treat her to something more than canned soup or dollar pizza slices. She had been begging to eat at the Golden Willow, a fancy restaurant downtown that sparkled with fairy lights and polished glass walls. It was the kind of place where laughter sounded expensive, and waiters walked like they floated. Ethan had always passed by it on his cleaning route, staring in from the outside, imagining what it must feel like to be one of the people inside. But that night, for once, he wanted to make Lily feel like she belonged there too. He had dressed her in her best pink dress, brushed her curls, and even found an old suit jacket for himself, too tight around the shoulders but good enough to make her giggle and call him handsome Daddy. They took the bus downtown, Lily pressing her nose against the window, watching the world light up around her. When they stepped off, Ethan straightened his jacket and took her hand. He could feel his heart pounding, not from fear of the bill, but from the quiet hope that this night would be one she'd remember forever. As they reached the restaurant entrance, the golden lights seemed to welcome them. But before Ethan could pull the glass door open, he noticed a commotion near the side entrance. A woman in a wheelchair was trying to get inside, the rain dampening her hair and jacket. The hostess at the door stood in her way, arms crossed, voice clipped and cold. "Ma'am, this is a fine dining restaurant," she said sharply. "We can't have you blocking the entrance. You'll need to move." The woman's voice trembled as she replied that she had a reservation. The hostess shook her head, muttering something about keeping the place's image. Ethan froze. Around them, people pretended not to notice. Some turned away, others whispered. The woman lowered her head, her trembling hands gripping the wheels of her chair, her eyes glistening with humiliation. Something inside Ethan cracked. He knew that feeling, being made to feel small, invisible, like you didn't belong. He remembered nights when he'd been refused jobs because of how he looked, when people had turned their noses up at his uniform, as if being poor made him less human. Without thinking, Ethan stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "She said she has a reservation." The hostess frowned at him, sizing up his worn jacket, his soaked shoes. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It does now. You're turning away a paying customer because she's in a wheelchair." The woman's eyes lifted slightly, shock flickering behind them. The hostess stammered, trying to maintain her composure, but Ethan didn't let her finish. "If she's not allowed in," he said, "then neither are we." The restaurant manager appeared soon after, tall and polished, clearly irritated. Ethan stood his ground, explaining what had happened. Lily clutched his hand, watching her father with wide, nervous eyes. The manager sighed, muttering something about misunderstanding, then turned to the woman and offered a forced smile. "Of course, ma'am, please come in." But Ethan could see the insincerity dripping from his tone. Still, the woman nodded and thanked Ethan softly before rolling inside. Ethan expected that to be the end of it, but when they stepped in after her, the same hostess guided them to the far corner, almost hidden behind a column. "This table should be fine for you," she said. Ethan knew what she meant. It was where they put people who didn't belong in the photos. He wanted to be angry, but when he saw Lily's delighted face as she sat down, he forced a smile. "This is perfect, sweetheart," he whispered, taking her tiny hand in his. As they ordered, Ethan noticed the woman in the wheelchair seated near the window, alone. Her eyes darted between the rain outside and the silverware she hadn't touched. Something in her posture looked broken, not just her body but her spirit. The waiter had barely spoken to her. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that her night had been ruined by more than just rude words at the door. When Lily's meal arrived, she asked if she could give the woman one of her cupcakes. "She looks sad," Lily whispered. Ethan hesitated but nodded. Lily walked up shyly, placed the little dessert before the woman, and said, "My daddy says kind people make the world better. You can have this." The woman's lips parted and tears filled her eyes. She thanked Lily, her voice trembling. When Lily returned, Ethan saw the woman watching them, a soft smile slowly replacing her pain. They finished dinner quietly, but just as Ethan reached for his wallet, he froze. His stomach dropped, his debit card was gone. Panic flooded him. He must have left it at work or on the bus. The waiter's polite mask slipped when Ethan explained. "Sir, this is an upscale restaurant," he said coldly. "If you can't pay, I'll have to call security." Heads turned. Lily's eyes filled with fear. Ethan's face burned as he fumbled through his pockets. "Please, I can go back home and get cash," and the waiter interrupted, voice sharp. "That's not how we operate here." Before the humiliation could deepen, the woman in the wheelchair rolled closer, her voice steady. "Put their bill on my tab." Everyone turned toward her. The waiter blinked. "Ma'am, that's not necessary." "I insist," she said, her gaze fixed on Ethan. "Please make sure they're treated properly." Ethan tried to refuse, but she smiled gently. "You stood up for me when no one else did. Let me do this for you." After the meal, she asked if she could speak to Ethan outside. The rain had stopped and the air smelled of wet earth. Under the restaurant's golden awning, she introduced herself. "I'm Isabella Grant," she said softly. The name sounded familiar. Then it clicked. Grant Holdings, one of the biggest real estate firms in the state. Ethan blinked. "You mean you own—" She nodded, her eyes full of quiet sadness. "Yes, I own this restaurant, among others. I was testing them tonight to see how they treated someone who didn't look wealthy." She sighed. "Seems I got my answer." Ethan stood there stunned. He had stood up for her thinking she was just another person treated unfairly. He never imagined she was the one in control of everything here. Isabella smiled faintly. "You reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that kindness doesn't need status or wealth. It just needs courage." She looked at Lily, then back at him. "If you ever need anything, Mr. Blake, call me." She handed him a simple business card before rolling toward her car, driven by a quiet chauffeur. Days passed. Ethan went back to his life, scrubbing floors, fixing leaks, picking up extra shifts so he could keep the lights on. The restaurant incident faded into a warm, distant memory. Until one morning, his supervisor called him into the office. "Blake," he said, "you've been requested for a private cleaning contract. Pays double your rate." Ethan blinked. "Requested? By who?" The supervisor smiled. "A Ms. Isabella Grant." Ethan couldn't believe it. The next day, he arrived at a modern glass building downtown, Grant Holdings headquarters. Isabella greeted him personally, her smile genuine this time. "I wasn't joking when I said you'd change something in me," she told him. "I used to think money could fix everything. But after that night, I realized character means more than wealth." She paused, then added quietly, "I'd like to offer you a permanent position here. Maintenance manager. Full benefits. You'll have time for your daughter." Ethan's breath caught in his chest. For a moment, he couldn't speak. All the years of struggle, all the nights of wondering if life would ever be fair, this moment made them worth it. He accepted with tears in his eyes. As he shook Isabella's hand, he noticed she wore a small silver bracelet engraved with the words, "Kindness restores strength." She caught him looking and smiled. "Lily gave it to me last week," she said softly. "She wanted me to remember her daddy's words." From that day forward, Ethan's life slowly began to change. He and Lily moved into a better home, and every morning when he dropped her off at school, he reminded her, kindness comes back, just not always the way we expect. Isabella visited sometimes, not as a boss, but as a friend. They shared quiet conversations about resilience, hope, and what it meant to rebuild one's life with dignity, and though she still faced challenges with her condition, her spirit had healed in ways she hadn't thought possible. Months later, at a company gala, Ethan found himself standing at the edge of another polished ballroom, dressed in a clean suit that finally fit him. He looked around almost in disbelief, remembering the man who once mopped floors in silence. Isabella approached him, her wheelchair adorned with a single white rose. "You look proud tonight," she said warmly. Ethan smiled. "Not proud," he replied. "Just grateful." And when the music began, Isabella offered her hand, not in pity but in friendship. "Dance with me?" she asked softly. He hesitated only for a moment before nodding. Around them, people watched, not in judgment this time, but in admiration. Two souls, once strangers, now bound by a single act of courage that changed both their worlds. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps spread stories that remind the world that compassion still matters. Before you go, share in the comments. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment where kindness changed someone's life? We'd love to hear your story. And as the night inched forward, with rain whispering softly against the glass windows, Ethan and Isabella moved gently to the rhythm of the music. Two survivors of life's storms, proving that sometimes the smallest act of standing up for another can build a bridge strong enough to change everything.